Hello and welcome to the MB Om podcast, where you will learn to master the business of yoga with guests from around the world who have experienced becoming successful yoga teachers, studio owners, and much more. Now, here's your host, Amanda Kingsmith.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the MB Om podcast. I'm so excited to be back after a nice break over Christmas and New Year's. I hope that you had an incredible break, maybe had some time off with family and friends and loved ones in your lives. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Fave Yogis. Fave Yogis has been sponsoring the podcast for a number of weeks now, and I hope that by now you've had a chance to check them out. They're the newest yoga app designed specifically with yogis and yoga teachers in mind. The app was built out of Santa Monica, California by a practicing yogi and software engineer from MIT. Fave Yogis connects yoga students with their favorite teachers through a simple-to-use app that is free to download. Teachers can post one-time events like workshops and retreats, as well as their regular weekly classes, and then students can go on and easily find teachers' offerings from anywhere in the world. You can go on over to your app store and you can download the app entirely for free. When you sign up, use the code MBOM, M-B-O-M, and make sure that they know I sent you. All right, now on to today's episode of the podcast. I am so excited to be sharing this podcast episode with you today because I'm joined by yoga teacher, fellow podcast host, and the founder of Yoga for You Online, Kelly Smith. Kelly's joining me all the way from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and we talk about so much different stuff on this episode. One thing that Kelly really specializes in, though, is creating a yoga experience. So you can think about your class as simply a class where you guide people through poses, or you can turn your class into a yoga experience and really take your teaching to the next level. She also leads guided meditations on her popular podcast, Mindful in Minutes. We talk about how she does that and how you could get started with leading guided meditations online or in your yoga classes. Before we jump into this week's episode, I'm so excited to share an upcoming offering that Kelly and I have together. It's an awesome retreat called Elevate Your Yoga Biz. It's going to be in Nicaragua at the end of April, and it's designed for you, yoga teachers and wellness practitioners. It's 6 nights, 7 days, and it's going to be all about elevating your yoga business. Every day will include yoga and meditation, of course, and then a masterclass to help you create your dream yoga business. That'll be followed by a workshop so that you're not only getting the skills that you need to elevate your yoga business, but you're also learning how to implement them. That'll follow by some sort of local activity, great food, and then in the evening, we're going to have Dharma and community conversations to discuss different things like fears and challenges in the yoga industry, having an authentic presence on social media, and so much more. I'm also excited to let you know that we're running a really awesome promo for the first 2 weeks of January to really help you kick off this year on the very best foot. So if you head on over to the retreat at bit.ly/elevate your yoga, or click on it in the show notes or the description for this episode, head on over, use code ADZENTURE, ADZENTURE, and you'll receive 15% off. So once again, that's bit.ly/elevate your yoga, and it's code ADZENTURE for 15% off. All right. Now, without further ado, here is Kelly. I'm very excited to be joined on the podcast today by Kelly Smith, who is joining me all the way from Michigan, you said, right?
Yes, I'm here in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Amazing. Welcome to the show today, Kelly.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be talking to you.
Yeah, and I'm excited to be chatting with you as well. And I know we've got lots to cover on today's episode, but I thought a good place to start would be to back up and talk a little bit about how you first got into yoga.
Yeah, so I have been practicing yoga probably for about 15 years. I started when I was quite young, and I was doing I was using it as a form of cross training for my sports. I was an athlete. And then the big turning point for me was my mom, actually, when I was in high school, she got stage 3 breast cancer, and I was her primary caregiver. So we started to do kind of like some yoga and some movement and some mindfulness together. And we just kind of had this moment of like, this is it. Like this is what I want. This is what I want to do. And so I did go and I checked all the boxes. I went to college and I got my degree and my piece of paper and all of that. And then I went and got my first big girl job working in business management. And at the time I was dating my now husband, and he was applying to medical school. And once he got in, we moved to this very small town in Missouri, like very small. I usually describe it as like one bar or one Walmart small. And so we went there and I had to leave that big girl job. And I just felt like this was my opportunity to really do something that scared me. And I was going to have to leave everything and leave my family for the first time and start all over. And I thought, I really want to teach. And I had finished my teacher training right after college, right after I graduated. And I kind of was doing it like a little bit on the side. Like I think you see a lot of those people right out of teacher training. You're just trying to get your foot in the door and you sub here and you sub there, you offer some free classes. And I was kind of doing that. But when I went and I moved and had to stop everything, I thought, what the heck? I'm going to give it a try. And so I went down to Missouri and I started with offering just one class. And then from there, I started offering a few more. And then I started, kind of sharing a space and then renting a space. And then that turned into eventually owning my own studio. And from there, I had kind of, I had a lot of clients. That's like one of my favorite things is the private clients. And I had a lot of clients had a hard time leaving their home. And so I wanted to try to reach them without them having to leave their home. So I started teaching them online by like recording classes and then sending them. And that kind of grew into what is now Yoga for You, which is sort of an online platform for teaching. And then from that, I've kind of created my own method of teaching called the Yoga for You method. And it's a very student-based kind of teaching that's all about like inclusion and empowering your students. And so that's kind of where I guess the whole Yoga for You journey has started. And yeah, I guess that's kind of my story. And here we are. And so we've been doing lots of stuff and now I'm talking to you and connecting and
yeah, what an amazing story. I feel like I can relate a lot to that. I think like I kind of had a similar journey. Like I did the whole like college thing and then I graduated and I got like a business type job and I call it my big girl job. Yeah, I call it my big girl job too.
Right.
And then I was like, I don't like this big girl job thing. I want to do something different. So I can definitely relate to that. And I think it's really powerful to like follow that. Like I think it's hard. Like it's not always easy to tell your friends and family like, okay, I don't want to do this big girl thing anymore. I'm going to go, become a yoga teacher.
Yes, it was really hard. And I think the hardest part was not even like, cause everyone wasn't supportive. And I think, and I'm sure that you know this and everyone knows this, that at times you make choices and not everyone's going to support them. And that's just the way it is. But that wasn't even the hardest part. The hardest part for me was getting out of my own way and having the courage to actually try to do this thing I'd always dreamed about, but was always too afraid to do it. Yeah. And that's really like, cause I think that's the hardest part.
Yeah.
The rest of it, I have a pretty thick skin. I can say, well, if you don't believe in me, that's fine. I believe in myself. But then when I actually had to like walk the walk, it was so hard.
Yeah. I like fully agree with that. I think that, especially because like I was out of my parents' house and I wasn't like living with them. So it's like their influence was very minimal. So they would kind of be like, I don't really know what you're up to, but it wasn't like so much that wasn't like that I was like, oh, I should probably switch what I'm doing. But yeah, definitely like me being like, well, I don't know if I can do this. Oh, there's so many good yoga teachers out there. Like, I'm never going to be that good. Like, how am I going to succeed with this? And I mean, I still feel that sometimes. I'm like, oh, like maybe I should just give up and go back to my big girl job.
Yes, I think we all have those moments. I definitely have them too, where I'm just sitting there and I'm like, okay, why am I doing this? Can I really do this? Is this still my path? And just like sticking to it. And at the time it was not even my parents. My parents are awesome. My mom is just like my inspiration. She's the one that just like set me on this whole path. And no matter what, she just like believed in me. She's my person. But I was just at that point a couple years out of college where everyone is getting those first big jobs, like the real jobs. And that was almost the hardest part because I have all of these amazing smart friends and they were becoming like engineers or they had these, awesome jobs working in politics or they're going and, getting advanced degrees and things like that. And then I would go to like my 1-year reunion and I was like, I'm a yoga instructor and I don't know why it bothered me so much. And so I was like, but also, I also have this other job too. And it's a big girl job and it's like in management and business. And And so I really had to kind of get a lot of courage to decide that I was going to take that leap and go from big girl job to, starting over and at least exploring what I loved and trying to do it for work.
For sure. Yeah, I can relate to that 100%. If somebody out there is listening and they're like, yes, like I'm at that point as well, what do you feel like are a couple things that really helped you to kind of like get out of your own way or to just really like be courageous?
I think something that I've been reminding myself a lot and that I had to learn for myself and that I share with my clients is to sometimes you have to step outside of how you perceive yourself and you do have to look at the way others see you. And when I say that, I mean not like in the way where other people, see us and judge us, but like think about that person that just loves you so unconditionally. So like for me, if I looked at myself the way that like my mom sees me, right? And if I were talking to her and letting her know like, oh, but I'm scared and I don't know if I can do it and it's going to be really hard and what if I'm not good enough? Just imagining what she would say to you and then seeing yourself in that light. So giving yourself permission to be like, you know what? I can do this. Like there's a reason that this person sees me that way. And it's because I have these qualities and not apologizing or, not talking yourself out of it. Just being like, these people think I'm great because I am. And not in like a, really stuck up way, but just believing in your own greatness. And I had to learn that kind of the hard way that, I could have all these people saying, no, you can do that. That's awesome. Go for it. But if I don't see myself that way, it's not going to happen. And so I really worked on just kind of like building myself up instead of trying to make myself smaller.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, totally. I love that. I think that it's really amazing because like the way some of the things that we say to ourselves, like our self-talk and whatnot, are things that we would like never say to somebody that we care about.
Yeah.
And then it's like, why on earth would we say that to ourselves? So I love the idea of, looking at who really cares about you in your life and who, like holds you to the highest standard and being like, how do they perceive me? Like, what do they see in me? And how can I see that in myself?
Right. And I tell my students a lot, when I work with a lot of people on like self-love and just kind of, that personal work. And a lot of times we do this exercise and it's kind of like a loving kindness exercise, like a self-love. And they have to see themselves the way that I see them. And so these are my really close clients. And so the people that I know really well, and they know me really well. And I always tell them, imagine what I see through my eyes when I look at you. Like imagine just like the beauty and the competence and just like the incredible being that's in front of me. Like see yourself that way. Give yourself permission. A lot of times I think we're always trying to make ourselves smaller. We're always trying to, make ourselves less instead of celebrating like our own vibrance and how other people see us. And so I always tell them to try to do that. But again, and I bet you can probably relate to this. It's a lot easier to do that for others than to do it for yourself.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's like, it's really easy to, especially like as yoga instructors, and we're there and we want to help and we want to nurture and we want to care. And it's so easy for us to really like build up our clients or build up our students and see like their greatness. But then when we turn the lens, we look at ourselves in the mirror, are we giving ourselves that same compassion? And I find a lot of times not. And when I do teacher trainings, when I train other teachers, they'll be like, oh, well, I have this instructor that's really great, or you taught me this and I really liked that. And they shy away from looking at their own greatness. And it's almost as if like we need someone to give us permission to do that. To be like, you know what? I do have these qualities. So if anyone feels that way, I now officially give you permission to see your own greatness. You don't need permission anymore. You have it.
Amazing. I love that. And so did you decide to shut down your yoga studio that you were running in Missouri when you moved up to Michigan, or what did that kind of look like for you?
I did. And that was a really hard time for me. It was just actually this summer, so not that long ago. So my husband is in medical school, so we move quite a bit. And when I first moved down to Missouri, I thought my goal was to just be able to support us teaching yoga. And then that kind of evolved quite a bit over. We were there for 3 years. So it went from, I was working all of these like random jobs trying to pay the bills. And then I had like my yoga classes that really fed me and I was really excited about it. And then I was like, at a gym, scrubbing bathroom floors just to like get the bills paid. And then it started to grow and where I was able to fortunately support us. And then it grew more and where I had a larger following, I was really able to get a lot of one-on-one clients. And then eventually I knew I was going to leave, and it's a very small place, like I said. And so I was a lot of the yoga community that was there. And so my fear was that this beautiful community was going to fall apart if I left. And so I had a student of mine that really challenged me, and she's so incredible. And she was like, well, why don't you start teaching teachers and like offering teacher trainings? And I had the qualifications, and I had the knowledge, I had the resources. And I decided to make myself small. And my first response was, oh no, I couldn't do that. I could never do that. I'm really young, and I've only been teaching for, however many years at this point, like probably like 5 years. I've only been teaching for 5 years, and all of my students would be older than me. And I started making myself small again. And I needed this student. She really challenged me, and she was like, no, Kelly, she was like, people want to learn from you. And she was like, I'm just putting it out there. Give it some thought. And that was it. That was the end of that. And so then I did think about it, and I thought about it more. And then I kept kind of getting these like signs, like more people just like asking about it. And you know how the universe sometimes just, it's like it tells you things, and it just keeps telling you louder and louder and louder until you finally listen. Yeah. And until it's like screaming in your face. And so that was happening. And so I started doing teacher trainings, and so that I could help kind of create this yoga community and have other instructors so that they could kind of continue on with building this great community that was there. And so we found out that we were going to be moving. And so I started training instructors. And then, I kind of just had this moment of another one of those crossroads, like, okay, well, what am I going to do? What's coming up next? Like, what is the right decision? And so I did decide to sell the studio and try to make the full transition to being online and kind of doing the freelancing work and kind of doing it just for myself. And so that's what I've really been working on now.
That's amazing. That's such an incredible story. And I love that you were able to create such like a tight knit community in this small town and, offer these people that may not have had yoga before yoga.
Yeah, it was by far one of the most incredible experiences. And when I say incredible, I mean like best, worst, hardest, greatest, most rewarding, like one of just the best experiences for me, because I really got to work on my teaching, but then meet the most incredible people. And they were all people that I probably wouldn't have met or wouldn't have tried to meet. Like, I don't think our paths would have naturally crossed if I wouldn't have decided to make that choice and to try to do yoga and to move to this small town and to take those steps. And I am just like forever grateful that I made that choice, only because I met such great students, especially like that one that just really pushed me and was like, she was like, basically had to tell me, she was like, stop making yourself so small. Kelly, you're always building us up. Like, just give it thought. And I kind of needed that push. And again, I needed to see myself the way that these other people saw me. Yeah. I just needed that student to kind of give me that kick in the butt to be like, okay, well, you know what? I should look into this. I should give it thought.
Yeah, and that's amazing.
And so that's, yeah. And I am very grateful to her. She's still a friend of mine. So I've been kind of shifting my business a little bit to doing more continued ed and more teacher trainings, and especially helping new instructors like me to kind of get their foot in the door. Because I think that's an area that a lot of people get stuck. And I think because the market is quite saturated, that it can be really hard to get your foot in the door. And not everyone gets the opportunity like I did to kind of move to an unsaturated yoga market and just get to hit the ground running. Like, I don't think a lot of people get to do that.
Totally. Yeah. You're 100% right on that. That was like where my inspiration for MBOM came from. And I had like a totally opposite experience as a new yoga teacher. I was in a super saturated market with like amazing yoga teachers. And I was like, everyone and their dog has a yoga teacher training in this town. Yeah. And there's like 3 yoga studios for like 20,000 people. How on earth am I going to get a job?
Yes. And then you're like, there's all these instructors, and a studio has like 40 instructors, and they all have like their one class. And then you're there and you're on the sub list and you get that call like once every 3 months and you're like, oh, okay, I'll be there. I'll sub. I get it.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious what you learned through your experience living in this town and, you know, building up this yoga community, owning a yoga studio, you know, teaching people who you may not have otherwise taught.
I don't even know like where to start. I feel like I could write like a novel with that question because there's just
maybe you should.
No. No, I am much more of a chatter than I am a writer. I will be honest about that.
That's fair.
But I something that I learned, one is I think I learned how much yoga can really be a privilege, and it can be a privileged thing. So the town that I was living in was one that did not have a lot of income going through it, and it was very isolated, and it wasn't the place where people have a lot of disposable income to, you know, spend on a membership to a studio, because we all know, if we're all teaching, we know, right, those prices are really high, and you need to be able to have that disposable income to be able to belong to a studio. And so I think I moved there and I had this idea in my head of what it was going to be like, and I thought, and like hindsight, I just think like how un-yogi of me. And I thought, oh, well, there aren't going to be people like me. There aren't going to be yogis. Like, it's just going to be so different. And I had moved from Minneapolis, which is like this very large, you know, a very yogi place, if you will. and so I went and I felt like I was really closed-minded, and I wasn't practicing what I was preaching. I was not living my yoga. I was doing poses. I was doing asanas. I wasn't living it. And so I think one of my biggest takeaways was just opening up my own mind. And I think about how if I would have never opened my mind, I would have never met the most incredible people. And they taught me so much. And like I said, they're people that I probably wouldn't have crossed paths with, or if we were all at a party together, we probably wouldn't have even connected there. And I would have missed out on so much. And so I started to, it's always been a mission of mine to kind of make yoga more accessible. And so to make sure that, you know, my prices are low, and that, you know, I do offer those community classes, and that I offer free courses when I can, or I try to give scholarships, like to teacher trainings when people need it. And I think that I really learned just what a privilege yoga is for so many people and how we can take that for granted.
Right. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And so can you tell me a little bit about like the transition from being in this community, really hands-on with these people, to moving to a new place and taking your business mostly online?
Yeah. So it's been really different, but in a great way. So I have had more freedom to kind of explore what I want to do personally. But I've also gotten that experience of like being the new instructor on the block, which I think is really good. And it's been a very humbling experience in a great way, because I do like to teach some classes in person too. Like, that's really important to me. I like that connection. I want to talk to people, not always a screen. Mm-hmm. And getting that feel for, you know, kind of like you described in this saturated market. It's like you come here and your name isn't enough. You know, people don't know. It's not like when I had my own studio and just saying, oh, I'm going to Kelly's class, like everyone knew what that was. And that was kind of enough. Like, I had already spent that time like building up my reputation as like a reputable instructor and being knowledgeable, and, you know, people knew my style. And then I come here and it's like, I'm just another name on a schedule, and I have to start all over, and I have to build up that reputation. I have to work just as hard, if not harder, to really work on like fine tuning my teaching and to kind of help build myself back up and help build up my following and my students again. And so that's been a challenge, but such a great challenge, because it's given me this perspective of like, oh yeah, I am like that new instructor again. So I have to really work on like, you know, creating this experience for people, or, you know, really working on creating this package that I have that I give to people through my classes. But I also have been really grateful because I can start to, you know, work on some of my passions and some of the things that I wouldn't have had time to do when I was running a studio and doing all these teacher trainings and, you know, filling up my calendar full of private clients. And so being able to do things like my podcast, it's just a guided meditation podcast. That's something that I would have never had time to do, but I always thought about it. And I was like, oh, I'd really like to do that. And now I finally have the freedom to get to kind of explore these things for myself.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love being able to make a change in life where you're able to, have a bit of time to kind of do those things that have been on the back burner for so long and just have those experiences and those learnings.
Yeah, it's been really great.
And so one of the things that I know that you do really well is the idea of taking your yoga classes from simply just like, sequencing and asana to actually having more of an experience. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I would love to talk about that. Something that I've been working on is a little bit of I've kind of been working on like some online courses, and one of them is literally called Stop Teaching Yoga Classes, Start Offering Yoga Experiences. And I think that, you can go anywhere and you can take a yoga class, like literally anywhere. You could find a yoga class. But I think we all know that feeling of like when you go and you have an experience and you have an instructor and they go above and beyond and they really connect with you and they just get it. They just like made this like magical moment. Like, have you ever been to a class like that?
Yeah, definitely. For sure.
Where you're like, that was yoga magic.
Yeah, the one that comes to mind to me the quickest is I did one of Sean Corn's classes at Wanderlust, and it's the only class I've ever done with her, but I've like heard a million things about her. And I was like, okay, this is why Sean Corn is as popular as Sean Corn is. Like, she is really that good.
By Sean Corn.
Yeah.
Sean Corn.
Yeah, like it was just...
Yeah, I'm curious what you think that she did to kind of create that experience for you. Like, what did she do differently than all of the classes you had been to?
So the first part of the class was like sun salutations. And I think she kind of did like variations on sun salutations, but she did it very much kind of like aligned with the chakras. But instead of just being like, okay, root chakra, like inhale, arms up, like exhale, forward fold, it was each thing was like, put it out to somebody. So, this one we're doing for your dad, like this one we're doing for your brother or your sibling, or, this one we're doing for yourself. And it was like outside, it was in Hawaii. It was like, there's hundreds of people there. So it's like a lot of really great energy. And she sat the entire time and she just like cued us through this really powerful yoga class. And I think because she got everyone to turn inwards and kind of be like, okay, I'm doing this sun salutation that I do a million times over in every yoga class for somebody that I really care about in my life, or maybe somebody that I have like, a tough relationship with. It's like you get all of this kind of emotion that kind of builds up in this space. And yeah, I think that that's kind of what made it more of an experience.
Yeah, that sounds like an awesome class. I wish I could have taken that.
Yeah.
But I think... Yeah, it sounds awesome. But it sounds to me like she didn't just lead a class, she taught a class. Like, she taught you something. You had something that you took away from that class instead of just like, oh, my body feels really great. I really worked on opening up my hips. Like, you had something from that class and it stuck with you beyond the actual like time limits of that class. And to me, that really says that's an experience. And I think something that I always tell my students to do is to start by creating a sacred space. So you have to think about all of the senses. And when you walk into your studio, you walk into your class, walk in like you're the student. And so you're going to look at it with different eyes. You're going to look and you're going to notice, okay, how do things look? How is, the lighting? It can be simple things like that. How's the lighting? How, does the room look clean and organized? Does it look like it's a place to practice yoga? What does it feel like? What is the energy like? Or even, more tactile, like what's the temperature of the room? How does it feel? What do you smell? Does it smell like dirty yoga feet, or does it smell like essential oils, or does it smell like nothing? Do you taste anything? What do you hear? Is there music playing, or maybe you're practicing in silence? And all of these things have intention behind them. And so when you're planning your class, or we'll call it an experience, when you're planning this experience for your students, have intention behind everything that you do. It's so much more than just taking these asanas together, these poses, and just stringing them together in a flow. And don't get me wrong, sequencing is really, really important. But when we're talking about creating this experience, everything needs to have the same amount of intention behind it as you would your sequencing.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I'm thinking, so if somebody out there is like, okay, that sounds awesome. I'm a little bit newer and I'm still kind of, struggling with like just remembering which foot I need to do now.
Right.
How do you feel like you can add like a little bit of that experience, like a little bit more experience, like each class?
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great question. So something that I always tell my students in teacher training, I always tell them, connect with your students. And this is something you don't, even if you get your lefts and rights mixed up, or, oh, oops, I accidentally did the right side twice and I only did the left side once, or, you stumble over your words and all of those kind of new instructor learning moments that we've all been there. Connect with your students. So the moment that they walk in, welcome them, greet them, thank them for coming to class, whatever it is, introduce yourself, connect with them, ask them their name. And then I try to get to know one non-yoga thing about all of my students so that I can kind of associate them with that. So like if you were my student and you came in and, and I'd welcomed you and we were just chatting a little bit and I said, I'm so grateful that you're coming here. And then you happen to tell me, oh, I'm in Mexico or I'm going to Mexico. So the next time I see you, I can be like, oh, that's Amanda. Whatever, Mexico Amanda, that might literally be how I would think of you in my mind as a student. And so then when you come in, I have that connection. I'd be like, oh my gosh, Amanda, how are you? How was Mexico? And so I'm already creating this experience because we know as instructors that the importance of community is like one of the most crucial things, not only in a yoga studio, but in a yoga practice. And even going back to the class that you were describing, you said the energy was awesome and you had, there were hundreds of people and you felt like you were part of a community and you were witnessing like this special thing. Is that accurate?
Mm-hmm, definitely.
Right. And so even just welcoming your students, getting to know their names and getting to know one thing about them that isn't yoga related. Yeah. Even if you just do that, you are starting to create that experience for them. And then when you're going through in classes, I know especially as newer instructors, we get kind of nervous with like hands-on adjustments and things like that, but keep connecting with your students. Get off of your mat, move through, look at your students in the eye. If you're going to do an adjustment, maybe use their name. Like let's say, you had your shoulders really high. We were doing crescent lunge, right? And you see a lot of people, they like bring their shoulders up towards their ears and there's all this tension. So maybe I would just come behind you and be like, oh, Amanda, relax, relax the shoulders and keep connecting. Let them know that you are there and you're supporting and you want to help them in their practice. And that to me is already so much more of an experience than I come in, I check in at the front desk, I listen, I go through the flow and I leave.
Right.
Not that it wasn't a bad class and it can have like the most amazing sequencing, but there has to be intention behind everything. Why do I come back to that class? And that's how you're going to get those students coming back for your experience. That's how you're going to build your following as an instructor, is that experience.
Yeah, I love that. It makes me think of, there's a studio owner that I work for in my hometown in Alberta, and he's done an absolutely amazing job of cultivating a really great community at the studio. And one day I was staying after class to talk to him about studio management stuff. And I was like, everyone wants to talk to him and he knows every single person's name at the studio. It's absolutely amazing. And I'm like, man, you know everyone here. And he's like, well, it's kind of my job. And I'm like, yeah, but like there was, 40 people in that class and you know them all. And he's like, don't tell anyone. But he's like, well, you guys are in Shavasana. He's like, I go through and I like pinpoint the names of all the people I don't know. And I just like say them back and forth to myself until I've got it.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I have done that. And I've had like nicknames, like endearing nicknames for people that even if like I'm really good at faces, but I'm not very good at names. Mm-hmm. And so even if it's just, I would always have this like older woman and she would come to class and she was really just coming there like to socialize and I could never remember her name. And so every time she'd come in, I'd be like, uh-oh, here comes trouble. And she was just like this wonderful, like 82-year-old woman. And I just called her trouble and she loved it. And that's just how I knew her. She was trouble and she was great. And she was in my class. And every time she came in, I was like, yes, trouble's here. But even if it's just like nicknames, like let people know that you see them. And I think even just in life in general, like letting people know that you see them like person to person. They're seen. They aren't moving through this life invisible is so impactful. Mm-hmm. And so even if it's just something silly, like a nickname or reviewing names when people are in Shavasana, which I love, or, you know, I've done that before. I've had like the sign-in sheet and then I'm quick, like going through my head. I'm like, okay, I know this person, this person, this person. Oh, I don't know who Michelle is. So that must be Michelle or whatever it is. And, you know, trying to learn people's names and connect with them. But I think if you can just let people know, like, I see you, you are important to me. Like, you're not moving through this life or even this yoga class invisible, I think really can stick with people.
Yeah, definitely. I really love that. And I think that, you know, and I just think about, you know, how amazing that yoga studio is done because of those little touches. It's like, it totally makes a difference. And I think that, you know, as a practitioner too, it's like, I mean, I've practiced all over the world at different yoga studios, and there's definitely a difference between somebody who takes like even 15 seconds to like engage with me and act like they're interested in me versus somebody who just like, I sign in a sheet, they don't even like acknowledge me. And then I practice and I leave and it's like, I'm kind of like nobody there. Like I've just come and gone anonymously.
Right. And you're certainly not going to go and try to find, you know, where is that instructor teaching next? How can I go to another one of their classes? You're not going to be doing that. You're just going to be one of those students that, oh, if that class happens to align with when I'm free in my schedule, I'll go. But if you're creating that experience, then people are going to be looking for your classes. They're going to be, you know, rearranging things. They're going to be like, oh, I have to get to Amanda's class, or I have to get to Kelly's class, because they want that experience. And if you can give that to them, they are your student and they are your customer for life.
Yeah.
And because you can teach them. I had this morning, it was like, I don't know, it's just like the most special thing. And it was this client that I hadn't seen in a while, and one back from Missouri. And he just sent me a text and he said, I just wanted to say thank you, like, for, you know, this one thing that you taught me so long ago. Or it was just this very, very small thing that I hadn't even remembered, but it had stuck with him. And just this morning he texted and he was like, you know, I just wanted to say thank you. Like that really stuck with me. And it was because we had made that connection that it had stuck with him. And he really felt like I was teaching him and not just leading him.
Yeah, I really like that. That's awesome. And I mean, it's cool too that like after so long he can just reach out and be like, I just wanted to let you know that I'm like still thinking about this.
Yeah, it was just one of those moments where I was just like, oh my gosh, it made probably like my whole week. But that's part of it. Like, I want my students to know, like, I'm always available to them. And I don't mean that in terms of like not having boundaries. I mean, you know, some of them do text me, but even if it's just sending me an email and they know like I might not get back right away, but I will always get back to them. Or if they want to talk after class, you know, they know I might only have 5 minutes, but I might have that 5 minutes to be like, you know, I really want to tell you more about this. Like, you know, give me your email tonight when I get home. I'm going to send you a response because I think this is an important question and I want to give it the time to response that it deserves. Mm-hmm. And really building that like student teacher relationship helps to create that experience and to create that community.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. I'm curious if you have any tips for like ensuring that you do keep those boundaries, because I think it is kind of like this fine line of like, you know, talking for 5 minutes and then, you know, an hour of your time goes by and you're like, okay, I really can't do this like every single week, even though you're really cool.
Right. Yes. So usually, a couple of tactics. One, I would just let people know just let them know, be like, I am loving connecting with you. You know, I wish if I could, I could hang out and I could chat all day, but just let them know, be like, but I have another class to get to, or, you know, my next client is about to come in and I want to make sure I give them, you know, the same amount of time that I would give you. And, you know, just let them know, just be honest with people. Cause a lot of times people just want to listen or they just want to be heard. And so just give them their time that you think is appropriate. And I think we're always so like, you know, nice all the time. Us yogis are always like really nice and really loving. But you can be honest with people. You can let them know. You could tell them like, I love what you're saying and I appreciate that you're telling me this. You know, if they're asking you a question, just say, you know, can I get back to you? You know, can I send you an email later with it? Or just let them know that you do still have other things, and people will be really responsive to that. And if they're not responsive to that, they perhaps need to kind of visit their yamas and their niyamas a little bit more.
Right.
But people will be respectful of that, but it's your job as the instructor kind of set those boundaries and set the tone from the get-go. So if you right away are, letting people chat for a whole hour and not setting those boundaries up in the beginning, that's going to be what people expect. But if you can right from the get-go, especially as like a newer instructor, kind of set your boundaries and stick with them, then people just know what those boundaries are, and you've set kind of the tone for that student-teacher relationship.
Yeah, definitely. I think it is a really important thing. I have really, really good friends that I've made from like going to yoga classes or from yoga studios. And I think that, especially as a yogi, you can really create amazing relationships, which kind of, you have to cultivate those, of course, like they don't just happen. Right. So I know I've definitely been on the side of having students stay and talk, and I've also been a student who stays and talks as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And it can be hard. And I think you just often have to use your best judgment as to, whether it's time for you to, move on and go on to your next thing. And they're just there, because they just want to chat, or if a student really wants your guidance on something, and using your best judgment. I think it's absolutely fine to maybe stay a little later than you usually would if someone wants your guidance and they really need like what you have to offer, like as a teacher or as a peer or just as, a person, but being able to distinguish between that and then just wanting to chat. Or just wanting to hang out. And using your best judgment.
Yeah, definitely. I think that that's really important. And I also think like it's probably the same thing with, giving out phone numbers and that sort of thing. Cause again, I feel like there shouldn't be like a hard and fast rule. Like if you want to go for coffee with somebody, it's like, of course you should do that and maybe build a friendship out of that. But definitely, I guess trusting your judgment is the best thing to do there.
Yeah. And the cell phone number is one that I kind of go back and forth on. The one, and this is after, of course, I just tell this story about how a former client of mine texted me, but I think that like cell phones can be a really great tool for scheduling and for connecting with your students. But I think also setting up that boundaries, like if your client or student kind of texts you, and then just even responding and being like, hey, yeah, I'd love to talk about that. Maybe we can connect with it, about it in class, and kind of like reaffirming that, they do have this access to you, but it's pretty much just for like scheduling. And then if they want to, connect, that would have to be either during their session or in the studio. And so I think that's kind of one of those gray areas, especially the cell phone with students, because you don't want to, like, you could always be texting clients or emailing people, or you could let it take up your entire day if you wanted, easily.
Totally.
And so just setting those boundaries right away. And so if you are sharing, if you do your scheduling from a cell phone, do it just for that. And you don't have to, be texting me like, hey, what's up? How's your day? Or if they're texting you that, be like, oh, thanks for asking. It was great. See you Tuesday at 4 or whatever it is. And just letting them know, like, that have that professional boundary.
Yeah, definitely. I think that that's so important. And I feel like you've found a good way to kind of deal with that nicely. Like just, kind of being like, okay, I'll see you in class.
Well, people are much more receptive than you think. I think people get it. Everyone knows what it feels like to, want your time away from work or to want your time away from your phone or whatever it is. Everyone understands that. And so if you just, politely remind them that, that this is your non-work time, this is your non-yoga time, I think that they get that.
Yeah, for sure.
At least that's been my experience. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So you recently created online guided meditations. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And so can you talk a little bit about how you actually went about creating those?
Yeah, so I decided to create the podcast called Mindful in Minutes, and it is these short 20-minute or less guided meditations with a different topic every week. And so I've always been a fan of telling stories. And so in my mind, creating a great guided meditation is telling someone like a really good story, except at the end of the story, you're just bringing them to a deeper part of themselves, or you're bringing them to relaxation, or you're bringing them to something better. And so I started to record these meditations that I've been using with students and clients of mine all the time, and then just basically releasing them out every week with a different guided meditation. So people can take this big, scary thing of meditation, and they can kind of take it in these small little increments and do meditations with someone else leading them. I think that people find that a lot easier and kind of a good way to get into meditation. I think often just the seated meditation and trying to quiet the mind can be really scary and challenging for people. And this is a great way for them to kind of get an idea of what it's like to kind of quiet those fluctuations of the mind.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been meditating for a number of years now, and I still find it like quite challenging to just like sit down and just like breathe and focus on my breath. Like I find that I'm like very easily distracted, especially if I'm at home. I'm like, oh, I should go make something to eat, or oh, I should go clean the kitchen, or oh, I forgot to put this on my to-do list. And the next thing I know, I'm not meditating anymore. And I'm like, what on earth are you doing?
That's what I was going to say. I always write my to-do list, always. Or I think I'm like, oh, I have to remember to respond to that person's email today. Like that's what pops in my mind. I'm just like, oh, dang it, I did it again. And so I personally use a lot of guided meditations just for my personal practice, because I think you're right, for a lot of people that works to help keep their mind on the practice instead of letting it wander to all these other places.
Yeah, for sure. That's 100% my experience. And it's funny too, because like as a yoga teacher, I lead people through meditations as well. So
right. But that's your humanness. One of my favorite mantras that a student, we were reading this book, and one of the mantras in the book was, oh, how human of me. And we had this like just giant laugh over that mantra. And I don't even know why. Like at the time, it just seems so silly that your mantra would be, oh, how human of me. But it was one of those things where it just like, it stuck. And so now whenever I, like if I think, oh, I'm this yoga instructor and I lead people through guided meditations all the time, and I'm sitting here thinking about how I have to respond to this person's email instead of my meditation, I can just be like, oh, how human of me. Yeah. And it kind of just like, gives me permission to not like be so hard on myself.
Yeah. And I love that.
But yeah, at the time it was really silly, but it's one of my favorite mantras now, where I just think, oh, how human of me.
Yeah. I'm definitely adopting that.
Yes. I have a lot of very human moments.
Yeah.
A lot.
It's always nice to know that we all do.
Yes. So you're just being human. And that's like, like when we were talking about seeing yourself the way that others see you, like a small mistake, like I wouldn't like get angry at a student, or I wouldn't get frustrated with them because they were trying to work on their meditation and they told me that, their email inbox was popping in their mind. I wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, you're the worst. Why would you do that? Or how could you let that happen? Or you need to work harder. Like those kind of things that I think I would never say that to a student.
Totally.
And so why don't I hold myself to that same standard and think, oh, how human of me.
Yeah.
And just, that happens. And I had a teacher, and his whole style of yoga is one that has to do with like smiling and loving. And his thing is when the mind gets distracted, it's tense. And so if you can smile, it relaxes the mind and it helps to bring you back. But then you're also kind of getting those physical responses of like a smile. And so you're being kind to yourself. And yeah. I love that. And so he even like with his style of meditation, you start by physically smiling. And so it feels like kind of silly at first, but it really does help to kind of let go and just see more of like the lightness and the humanness in it all.
Yeah, definitely. I really love that. My boyfriend and I co-host a travel podcast, and we used to get like when we were pretty new to it, we've been doing it for a couple of years now, but when we were newer to it, we would spend, a bit of time before like big interviews or even like, longer episodes that we were recording, like just kind of getting in like a good happy place. So his thing is he'll like bite on a pencil and like make the smiley, like make a smile with it, because it like forces your muscles to be in that position. It looks so silly, but it like gets your muscles activated, and then it just kind of makes you happier. Or like putting on like a happy song and just like dancing really freely like around the apartment is something that kind of gets you out of your head and into your body and just like releases endorphins really quickly.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. Or even just like laughter. Like it's so wonderful. And I think that's something when you're talking about, creating that yoga experience. I think that often we're in classes and as teachers, we're so serious and we create this vibe of like really serious yogis. Like there is serious yoga happening right now. And sometimes I think it's okay just to laugh or be kind of lighthearted, or if you do mess up and, you get your lefts and rights mixed up, even to just say, oh, oops, I meant the right foot. How human of me. And to just kind of keep rolling with it. It lightens the mood. And I don't think that we always have to be so serious, and it helps you connect. And if your students can see the humanness in you, it helps them to relate to you and to see, maybe you as a teacher are a little farther on the journey than I am, but we're still on the same path.
Yeah, I really love that. I really don't like the idea of like personally, I don't like the idea of being like put on a platform or on a pedestal and somebody thinking that I'm like better than them because I've like done a different certification or anything. Like I really don't like that at all. So it's like, I always try to bring myself to other people's level and be like, I'm just like you, like I fall over too. And
yeah. Or, I try to balance and I wobble and look like I went to happy hour before class. So it's like these things happen. And I don't think that, I that's something that I struggle with a lot is when people, even like something like joining you on this podcast, it's like in my mind, I have those moments where I'm like, well, why am I qualified to do that? Like, I'm just trying to figure it out like everyone else. But I think that is what can make instructors like really stand out and help create that experience, because you guys are kind of figuring it out together. You're going on this journey. Every time that someone chooses to roll their mat out with you, you are taking them on a journey.
Yeah.
And they're deciding to go on it with you. And so I think really kind of keeping that in perspective can help to grow that thing, that special thing. Or if you have, like, I often tell my students when creating an experience, like have not only a theme for your class, but an intention for your class. Like, why should your students care? Why should they come to your class? So of course you should always have a theme and a plan that you're going to weave through your whole class, but like, why should they be there? If you can't answer that question, you shouldn't be able to expect your students to be able to answer it.
Right.
Like if you don't know why your students should be there, they're not going to know. And so even if it's just, well, my intention behind this class is for us to explore the idea of balance together, great, that's awesome. Then you know why they should be there, and then your students should know why they should be there and what they're getting from that. Yeah. And I think that really helps to kind of create the bigger experience instead of just, sequencing a balanced class. And then maybe you do a lot of foot balances. Well, that's great. But instead kind of making it this journey, taking them on a little trip, using this theme, using the intention, being down at their level, and you're all just trying to figure it out together.
Yeah, I love that. I think that that's a really amazing way to tie in that, experience once again. Mm. And so in terms of guided meditations, I think that that's, it's something that we learn a little bit about in like a basic 200-hour yoga teacher training. But I feel like in most teacher trainings, we're not really actually taught how to write those meditations. I know in my restorative teacher training, we did a little bit more of that, because people are in longer poses, and we talked a little bit more about guiding people deeper. But in my 200-hour, we didn't really cover that. Do you have any tips for writing an effective guided meditation?
Yeah, I do. I took notes for you.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, I'm a note taker, just a little secret. I have like all of these notebooks everywhere with like random things written in it. But anyway, so you have several.
I'm the same.
Yes. So you, Amanda, have several pages right now. I went into my teacher training manual. It's funny that you say that in teacher training. But I think people do just get like kind of this little snippet of it in teacher training. And it's like, well, this is meditation. Like, here's how you can quick do it in Shavasana. And then that's it. We never go back to it.
Right.
And if we do it, it's through our own like discovery and our own research and figuring it out, or having to go take like a meditation course. So this is usually how I teach it. So like I said, a guided meditation is just telling someone a really nice story. And when I say that, I mean, you have to use all of the senses. So when you're talking about walking into your studio as a student and noticing, like, what do you see? What do you hear? What do you feel? What do you smell? A guided meditation is the same thing. You have to use all of the senses, but you want to start with the end of the story. So you want to kind of do a spoiler right from the beginning. So where do I want to end? So let's say that, you, Amanda, were going to try to do a loving kindness meditation. Like that's what you were trying to decide. So the end of your story is creating this feeling, like being completely immersed in the sensation of like loving kindness. We're going to use that for an example. So you start with the end of the story, and then you start creating the framework. So deciding, what are you going to do? Is it going to be a visualization? Are we going to be, walking through the forest and feeling loving kindness? Are we going to be, looking into our hearts and seeing loving kindness, like deciding what the framework will be? And then you just start to fill in the details. You start to fill in the different senses. So think about, what do you hear? What do you see? What do you feel? What do you smell? And you just start telling this really detailed story. So this loving kindness example, I just recorded one recently, so it's fresh in my mind. And what I do is I have the student, the meditator, I have them visualize seeing other people standing in front of them. So I have them see first someone that they care about. So someone that they care about deeply, and then, someone that they're kind of neutral about, and then themselves, and then someone that's challenging. And they just kind of visualize like the sensation of loving kindness, right? So what do you feel? You feel the feeling of like pure love. You feel it all through you. And then, what do you see? You see loving kindness. So I usually would describe it maybe as like a red light or a thread moving from your heart to their heart, right? You see it moving from your heart to their heart. What do you hear? Do you hear them laughing when they receive that? Do you hear them, being joyful? What do you go through all of the different senses, and you start telling this story. You start weaving this narrative of an experience of loving kindness. And then from that, you just start to work your way through the story until eventually you've taken them to the end. So the end of this story here that I'm telling you would be that they see the whole world in front of them. They see everyone they could possibly imagine in front of them. And they have the sensation of loving kindness moving like this. I think of it kind of like, like Care Bears. Did you ever watch that as a kid?
Yeah,
maybe
definitely.
not. You're probably younger than I am. I don't know, but I'm not sure.
No,
but
Care Bears existed when I was a kid.
Yeah, that was like my jam. But it's a yogi in me when I was little. I was like, Care Bears. But so when they shoot like the light from like their stomach and it goes like up into the sky and it creates like this beam of light.
Yeah.
So that's what I think about like loving kindness in this meditation. I don't say that part, but this is like how I'm going to describe it. So I'm going to describe like there is this heart in your chest and it sends this beam of light out and shines into everyone else's heart and connects with them. And they feel the overwhelming sensation of loving kindness. And so I think about these things and then I just tell the story. And I just describe it. And that's really all that you have to do. And it doesn't have to be a big, long, elaborate, 25-minute guided meditation. Or if people teach yoga nidra, I teach that too. It doesn't have to be this big, long thing. You can start by just taking someone on a little, tell them a little 5-minute story leading them into Shavasana. So you just tell them a story about how, their body is relaxing and the soles of the feet relax, and you slowly work your way up towards the top of the head, and then their whole body is relaxed. And that was your story.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And that is really, I think it sounds so mysterious. And I run into a lot of teachers that feel like intimidated by it or they don't know what to say. But it's just imagining the end point and then telling the story. So it can be, you could probably, I bet with all your travels, you would be really great at this. But, just describing like what it's like in, maybe you practiced where you are now in Mexico, or you practiced, you were just sitting in stillness in an area, wherever it is, and just bring yourself back to that. Let's say, like, I did a guided meditation. I went to Iceland a little bit ago, and I did this like guided meditation of like, kind of being surrounded, like on a mountain, being surrounded by like a lot of green, just because. And I just went back to that space and I just described what it was like. And I just took my students there. I didn't say, okay, today I'm going to take you on this trip to this place that I saw in Iceland because I liked it. I just brought them into Shavasana, and I said, okay, we're going to imagine that we're laying on the side of a mountain, and, you know, you feel the comfort of the plush moss underneath your body supporting you. There's no effort on your part. And, you know, you feel the air on your skin. It's just the perfect temperature. It's comfortable, just a slight chill, but not enough to make you uncomfortable, just enough to wake up your skin. And then you hear the sounds of the grass moving around you, and you feel the sun shining on your skin, and you just start telling the story.
Yeah. And I love that.
That's all. It's so much easier than I think we try to make it. I think we're always trying to reinvent the wheel, but we have so many experiences. If we as teachers can just be really present and like take in the moment, like if we do it the way that we tell other people to do it, then every moment is an opportunity for guided meditation, or at least like resources for it. Maybe not every moment. Well, maybe. I'm thinking like if I'm being really mindful doing my dishes, like that's probably not a story I'm going to tell my students. But if I'm really truly mindful in these different moments as I move through in life, that's just kind of a resource that I can pull from to tell a story and take my students there and take them to that place, take them to a place of relaxation or a place of, you know, turning inward. Like you were really describing, you know, Sean Kaur, right? She took you to that place of like, she turned you inward. She took you to the kind of that journey where you felt connected with these important people in your life.
Yeah, definitely. We also, in my restorative teacher training, we had to do an exercise where we guided somebody while they were in a restorative pose, like into a cave. And it's like, I mean, I don't normally like tell stories about caves, nor do I ever like lead guided meditations about caves, but it was such an interesting activity to do, to think about like, okay, like what does this cave feel like that I'm describing? Like how dark is it? How light is it? Like what's in it? Like what's there? And, I think it's a really fun exercise to go through. And then of course, because we were in this training, we also got to be the recipient of it. So you got to experience as well what it's like. And it's this really cool way to just kind of go inwards because, you know, whatever, you know, say I'm saying to you, even if I'm describing this cave, it's going to show up in your imagination different than how I've described it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's something that's really important to keep in mind too. Two things. You saying that made me think of, the first thing, when you're leading these meditations, you're telling these stories, assume that no one has like any idea what you're talking about, but in a good way. So assume that no one has ever been in a cave when you're doing this. And so you have to describe it from the ground up, and that's going to make sure that you're covering all of the senses. It's going to help you get really descriptive. Also, when you're choosing your imagery and you're choosing your experience, try to choose ones that will be mostly positive for people. And what I say about that is try to avoid things. And I think it's interesting that you used a cave, because that's one that I probably personally wouldn't choose, but only because like I personally would never want to spend time in a cave.
Right.
And so I think that maybe there would be other students that would feel that way, where like, you know, I would love to spend time on the side of this Icelandic mountain. And so I'm going to do that, but keeping in mind that not everyone is going to have the same feelings for places as you will.
Yeah.
And so
definitely.
trying to pick something, you know, whatever you pick, be really specific about it, but think so much about, you know, some people don't like the dark. So a lot of times, you know, if it's during the day, and just know your students too. If you know they have some trauma in their past, or if you know that they have like anxiety or something, try to avoid visualizations that might trigger that. And so just kind of having that. And if it's a big mixed bag of people, let's say it's just like a community class, you don't know who's there, just, you know, you can go with whatever. But if you're with a client and you know them well, try to pick images that would help serve them, not ones that would ever like trigger something in them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So many people are afraid of like darkness and confinement, which makes a cave not a really great space. And maybe that was part of why we did it as the exercise. I don't know. Cause it was like during a training.
Challenging.
But yeah, I think it was like, that's a really hard thing. Like I could easily tell a story about, a field of wildflowers and, frolicking through that and what that feels like
under the sun.
Totally. Like something that's really happy. Right. So yeah,
or
maybe
like
that was
water is
but
another one. Like people have really mixed emotions about water.
Totally.
Some people love it and they're like, I'm half mermaid and I would live in the water all the time. Where like I personally, like I like to look at it. It looks nice, but I don't really want to go in it.
Yeah.
And so, thinking about these things is if you're teaching these big classes, let's say you're doing, one of my tips is always just start with a little 5-minute story in Shavasana. Know that you're going to have these kind of different viewpoints. So try to pick one thing, tell a story about their body just relaxing and letting go of tension or their heart opening up or, you're walking through the field of wildflowers or, kind of go for that. I don't want to call it like low hanging fruit, but go for those things where the most people will get the most benefit out of it. And then you can get more specific as you start to know your students better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So where can people go to find your meditations online?
So you can, if they're already listening to this podcast, if they're listening to me, they must know what podcasts are. So that's the first step. So you would just go into the search box. You would type Mindful in Minutes. It's going to be the first one that pops up. Another thing that you can do is you can go to my website. So www.yogaforyouonline.com. And like I was kind of talking about a little bit earlier, or maybe I forgot to mention this, but something that I've really been trying to do, something I've been trying to kind of do a little bit of a pivot in my business as I get a little bit more of that autonomy and get to really work on building like my business and not being held down by the brick and mortar, is that I am trying to take a lot of the things that I have taught my students like in the studio, and I'm trying to make it more accessible. So we have a lot of online courses coming up and, some free webinars and things like that coming up. So as instructors, if you want to go to the website and sign up for the newsletter, you're always the first one to know like when I offer kind of these free webinars, or a lot of times I'll just send out my resources because I really do think that together we would be stronger. I think sometimes there's a little bit of this, and this is a long answer to just where can people find me?
No, it's a great answer. I like it. I like where it's going too.
Yes, but I think that, we are all working towards this same goal, and there are so many, I think sometimes there's like this, because it is a really saturated market, there can be some competition of like, oh, well, I want to teach the most classes or I want to be the best instructor. But really, if you go down to the actual essence of the practice of yoga, and if we're living our yoga as teachers, we're there to help others on that path. And so I am very much not against just like sending out a lot of my resources or just saying, hey, I used this script for Yoga Nidra and I had really great feedback. Here's the script that I use. This is what I did. If you want to use it, use it. If you don't. But, if this is something that you want to use, feel free to use it. Because when we're all serving our students, we're all serving that greater idea of yoga.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And I really love that. So thanks for sharing that.
So website, the website, Mindful in Minutes, and then of course, like Instagram, things like that. It's all under Yoga for You. So Yoga for You online. Okay. And I respond to every email that I get. So if anyone is listening and is curious, I don't always respond like super quickly, but I always respond. So because sometimes I get a lot of them, and I try to keep that work-life balance.
Totally.
But so we'll send an email to info@yogaforyouonline. I will respond. It doesn't matter what the question is or what it is, I'll respond. So that's probably one of the easiest ways to get a hold of me.
Amazing. That's so awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of this, Kelly. It's been such a pleasure chatting with you today.
I really appreciate you having me on. It really is an honor.
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed that episode with Kelly and that you learned a ton throughout this episode. Kelly was so kind and actually created a really awesome masterclass for listeners of the show. So that will be linked in the show notes at mbomyoga.com, but you can also find it at yogaforyouonline.com/yoga-teacher-courses. It's an awesome close to an hour-long masterclass. It's a really great way to get a feel for what Kelly offers if you're interested in working with her further and just learning a little bit more about creating that experience. I know for me, when I was interviewing her during the show, I was just getting so many ideas about how to, take my teaching to the next level and to just really make my students feel a bit more comfortable. Once again, I just want to remind you that Kelly and I are offering Elevate Your Yoga Biz, a six-night, 7-day retreat in Nicaragua starting April 28th. To find out more information about it, head over to bit.ly/elevate your yoga and use code EDCENTURE for 15% off. As well, if you have any questions about the retreat, about the episode, or about anything we're doing over here at MBOM, just send me an email at info@mbomyoga.com. As always, you can find me on social media at Mastering the Business of Yoga. If you want to join the private Facebook community, you can join at Yoga Business Badasses. Just search it in the Facebook search bar and request to come in, and I'll let you in. As always, thanks so much for listening, and namaste.